Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to take a look at graphing these sines and cosine waves, but now we're going to incorporate a horizontal shift. So a shift left or right on how that wave is graphed. So let's remember what we've done before and where we've been. We've been talking about amplitude and period and increments and all of those things. We're still doing those, but we're going to add in that horizontal shift. My suggestion to you today would be to make sure that you have a pencil or a pen that you usually take your notes in, plus 2 additional colors. Okay, because we're going to draw in that shift, that horizontal shift, and then we're going to go ahead and draw in our amplitude, so we're going to need 2 colors. So here are some steps to think about here when we're graphing the sine and cosine with horizontal shifts added. So remember, we've been talking about the A being the amplitude, the B helping determine that period. Now you're going to see this set of parentheses here or here if it's a cosine. But again, that set of parentheses is where I'm looking for a horizontal shift. Just like we've been talking about these translations or these slides all year long, inside that set of parentheses is a very important part of finding that shift. So again, we're still going to determine that amplitude by looking at the absolute value of the A, determine the period by taking 2 pi divided by the B, determine the increment by taking the period and dividing by 4, so that's not new to us. But now remember that the horizontal shift is added in, and that horizontal shift will be found inside that x minus h part. So the horizontal shift is shown by that h value, okay? And we're going to still do the same things we've been doing all the time, but we're going to add in that horizontal shift, and that changes the way we start these graphs a little bit. So here's the first one we need to write down. We need to find the amplitude, the period, the increment, and the horizontal shift, and then we're going to graph this. So just like we've been working on, everything is here that we need. The very first thing we're looking for is the amplitude. We're going to pull that out of the equation, out of the function, and we see it's a -2. If we take the absolute value of that, that means my amplitude is 2. That means my wave has a maximum height of 2. Now the period is 2 pi divided by the b, and the b is located in front of the x. In this case, that would be 2. So if I divide 2 pi by 2, I get pi. And now if I divide that value by 4, that's what tells me my increment. So pi over 4, or 1/4 pi, same thing, is the increment that I'm going to count by. Now the horizontal shift, ladies and gentlemen, is now located right here in this set of parentheses. And please remember what we've been talking about before with how these shifts work. This says x minus pi over 2, but that really means that my shift is to the right pi over 2. Okay, we're going to move to the right pi over 2, even though there's a minus sign, just like we've been talking about with absolute values before and with parabolas before. Okay, all of that understanding of that shift inside those parentheses, we need to remember to think about that zeroing out spot. So that is actually to the right, or to positive pi over 2. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and sketch this graph. So I'm going to draw in my x and y axes, but be remembering that I have to shift to the right. That means I'm going to need more room on the right side of my graph. So this is my y-axis, here's my x, and my right side should be quite a bit longer because more of that wave is going to be graphed over there. Okay, so there's my x and y axes. Now I'm going to draw in that amplitude. That amplitude is the maximum height. So here's 1, 2. I'm going to go ahead and draw in my amplitude here. And then down 1, -2 will be down here. So da 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 da, da 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 da. There's my amplitude. And now the period, again, determines how we count our x-axes. So we need to count by pi over 4. So pi over 4 is the first measurement. Then 2 pi over 4. Then 3 pi over 4. Then 4 pi over 4. And then we set up similarly on the negative side. Okay, so we graph all these, or we sketch in those values. And now let's take a look at the next thing that we have in our list of things to think about, and that's that horizontal shift. So this is telling me now that my graph is going to shift over to the right pi over 2. Where is that pi over 2 on my graph? To the right, pi over 2. Well, this one right here is pi over 4. This one is equivalent to pi over 2. 2 pi over 4 is the same thing as a pi over 2. So that means my shift is going to go right to that spot. So I would draw in a vertical dash line right there. What this means is that is my new axis. My new y-axis essentially is over there. Okay, we're going to be plotting our points with that in mind. So you know how all of these graphs have been drawn with these four, measurements? We now scooted over 2 measurements to the right. So I need to add 2 more, continue past my pi here, and I'm going to label this 5 pi over 4 and 6 pi over 4. We need to make sure that when we scoot over or we shift over, we continue to add those same amounts on the other side, okay? Because we need to have space to draw these 5 critical points. Okay, so we've labeled now where that shift is going to happen. I labeled that in blue. That's our right pi over 2. So that's what this is showing. And remember, 2 pi over 4 is pi over 2. And now we will go ahead and start sketching in this graph because we've taken into account everything in our list. So noticing again that this is a sine, and I know that sine starts at the 0 out spot or at the middle, the midline. So the midline here is our x-axis here. This is the midline. And remember, above is 2 and below is -2. So this whole wave is going to be happening in between. Now, I also noticed that this was a negative sine. So that tells me that I will start at the middle, but instead of going up, I'm going to go down. So let's place our first dot, and we need to start at the middle. But this time, we're going to start on our shifted mark here on the middle. So there's my first dot on the shift mark that we made in the midline, okay? And now instead of going up like the sine wave usually goes, because it's negative, it's actually going to go down first, then back up, then top out, then back down. It always ends in the same spot or at the same level as what it began. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and draw that in. And now I need to continue on the other side. I need to go up. Now I need to go back down to hit the middle. This is a tricky one. Remember, this time 0 is a part of this, guys. Don't forget, just because 0 is not labeled there, we still need to hit that spot, and then down, and then back up. So there is a picture of the sine wave that has been shifted over pi over 2. Okay, that's that blue mark that we drew in there. That's the new thing that we're adding today, is that shift over. And we're going to need to adjust our numbering system just a little bit, including more values when needed. Notice that we didn't use these 2 over here. That's because we shifted to the right 2 units or 2 values, and so that left me with 2 extra values on this side. You can cross them off, erase them, or just leave them there, but you don't need to consider graphing that line any further. So let's fill in your domain and range. We're going to call this all reals, and my range is less than or equal to the number 2. That's the maximum height here, and greater than or equal to -2. All right, let's take a look at one more here. This will be the last one we do with this shift. We need to find the amplitude, period, increment, horizontal shift. So we're going to fill in all these blanks, making sure we label accurately and thoroughly. Labels are very important. You need to make sure your labels are there. So when I look at this equation, the amplitude in front, the amplitude would be 3. So the maximum height of the wave is 3. Period, 2 pi divided by 1/2. 1/2 is the value that would be in front of that x. 1/2. 2 divided by 1/2 is actually 4. It's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So 2 divided by 1/2 is the same thing as 2 times 2. That's 4 pi then. And the increment, if I divide that value by 4, we get pi. So we are numbering by pi's. What is the horizontal shift that we're going to do here? That's located in this set of parentheses. Now it says x plus pi. That means we have a shift left pi. Okay, so we need to go to the left pi, and that's going to be the new axis that we draw. So we're going to go ahead and set up our graph now. Since we're shifting to the left, keep in mind that if you draw your x-axis, we're going to need more room on the left. So I'll make the left side a little bit larger than the right side. And we should draw in our amplitude. So my amplitude is 3. 1, 2, 3. And then 1, 2, 3 down. Okay, 3, -3. Make sure you label those. Okay, and now the midline again is right in between, and that's going to be my x-axis here. So that's going to be the middle of the wave. And now we should label our x-axis by the increments that we decided. Increment is pi, so we're going to label pi, 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, and again, we may not use all of these. -pi, -2 pi, -3 pi, and -4 pi. And now let's apply that shift. The shift says we're going to go to the left pi. So if I go to the left to the pi, that would be right here. And I'm going to draw in this axis here with a new color. Okay, that represents the shift over. So that's going to be the starting spot where I start graphing my wave. All right, so once we have that shift drawn in, now we need to remember which one we're graphing. We are graphing the cosine. Oh, before we do that, I should add in here that since we shifted to the left, 1 pi, we need to add on an extra pi here so that we have 4 spaces on either side. We're going to use 4 spaces. And then also remember that this is 0. He counts as a space. Even though he doesn't have a pi there, it would be 0 pi. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about what we're graphing. Cosine. Cosine starts high. So we're going to start at the top. So I'm going to go on my blue line to the very top. There he is. That's going to be the start for my cosine. And then it comes down. So it's going to hit 0. And then it's going to bottom out under pi. It's going to come back up through 2 pi and top out at 3 pi. Now, you don't have to use the 4 pi, guys, because we shifted over to the left 1 spot, so we're going to have an extra one over there. So if I sketch in what we have so far, this is where we're at. And remember now it has to come down, bottom out, come back up, and top out. It always stops at the same level where it starts. So we can draw these periods here, and there we go. There's our beautiful cosine wave. So let's go ahead and fill in the domain, and then we're done. Domain and range, all reals. Y is less than or equal to the 3, greater than or equal to -3. Okay, that's how we would shift something horizontally. So you're going to need a few colors. It helps. I know it's kind of cheesy, but I'm telling you, the more colors you can incorporate, the easier it is for you to focus on the important spots and where you're going to make your dots. It should certainly makes your life a little bit easier when you're trying to graph these, okay? So I want to thank you for taking good notes.